A portion of today's video is sponsored by BetterHelp. We're hitting the point with leaks and rumors right now where, aside from Sony actually officially announcing it, it looks like we're getting a PS5 Pro later this year. There's still some very important hanging questions about it that I want to talk about, but as far as just the idea that one is happening and happening soon, it looks like it's on its way. And I not only want to talk about what we kind of know about it, but more importantly, I think contextualizing that information into a very important question. Should you wait on buying a PS5 right now when a Pro is on the horizon? Because with things like releasing the Slimline system late last year and more games coming out right now that are either current gen exclusive or PlayStation 5 specific, like Rise of the Ronin, which just released recently, Stellar Blade just dropped a demo and has a full release on the way soon, I can understand the temptation of grabbing a system right now if you haven't yet. But there's always that feeling of worry and disappointment that, you buy one right now and then find out however many months later that a newer, bigger, better thing is releasing that you would have wanted to get instead. And at least based on what we've seen so far, I think that answer is yes, you should wait on grabbing a system right now, but not because I think the Pro is just outright going to be the way you should go and is the system you need to grab, but rather because of some important missing things we don't know about it yet that really will determine whether or not it's a good idea to grab one. To begin with, let's just talk about what the PS5 Pro is, or at least is looking to be. Now, normally when it comes to things like rumor mill cycles and that kind of stuff, I tend to be a little bit more hesitant, and PS5 Pro has been a thing that ever since people were even just talking about the concept of one at the start of this generation, I was very resistant to the idea. And while I still don't fully see the point in one, based on the fact that we're seeing leakers with a lot of good tenure talking about it still. For instance, Tom Henderson, who's been very on point with a lot of Sony stuff, he correctly called the PlayStation 5 Slim, PlayStation Portal, the Pulse Explorers. All of that has been on track, and he's been talking a lot about PS5 Pro, so that makes sense. And not only that, but the more recent leak in regards to a lot of specs has been picked by a lot of news sources that I personally trust and put a lot more stock into. In particular, I think Digital Foundry did a really great dive into what that stuff looks like on paper and what it means for how the system is going to perform. And I'm personally not going to dive too in-depth on the spec side of things, but I do want to talk about the supposed end performance and goal of this system, which is, I think, something that some people have been a little disappointed by. It was really interesting to see the news cycle with the leaks coming out and people talking about what a 5 Pro is or could be or what it can do. And I think the kind of dream that a lot of people had built up about what a Pro system could be is, a souped up version of the PS5 that is not only, bigger, more powerful, but is able to do things like tackle, native 4K resolution, hitting 60 frames while supporting things like ray tracing in a lot of games that right now simply don't. There are tons of titles that are not actually hitting higher than 30 frames if they are doing native 4K, and oftentimes other compromises are being made for really demanding titles, and seeing a powerful system that would no longer need that kind of holding back would be really neat. And that's not what it's really looking like this system is going to be, at least based on the leaked specs we've been seeing, which has resulted in some people, I think, being a little disappointed with what it's more likely looking to be. Which, real quick on that note, speaking of dealing with disappointments and just negative emotions in general, let's go ahead and take a moment to thank today's sponsor, BetterHelp. A couple years back, I made a video talking about how I was dealing with creator burnout. And to be perfectly honest, it's not a thing I ever fully recovered from, I have my good days, my good weeks, but the rough ones keep coming as well. Either because I put a lot of effort and hard work into a video I'm excited about, and it's one that doesn't do as well, or I'm just stuck between ideas, looking at a blank white piece of paper wondering, what am I gonna do next? And there's a pressure that comes with it that can just be very overwhelming at times. And one of the ways that I've been able to deal with it better and work my way through those rougher times is with the help of therapy. And BetterHelp is one of the services I've used to work with that. It's very easy to sign up and get up and running. You can use my specific link, betterhelp.com/Kevin Kenson, and by going through that, you're going to answer a questionnaire that's going to help them figure out the best kind of therapist to match up with you. And usually within 48 hours, you'll be able to find a therapist that you can begin talking to either via text or calls, video calls, whatever ends up feeling more comfortable for you. So if therapy is something you're looking for and you think you could benefit from, check out the link down below in the description. So what does it actually look like the PS5 Pro is going to be? Well, it does look like it is a more powerful system than the current ones. It's just not having the kind of leap in power that would result in things like seeing games currently struggling to hit 30 frames really hitting something like 4K 60. Rather, it really looks like the main focus of the system is not just simply on a hardware bump, but also on introducing new technologies that would be proprietary to PlayStation in the form of their own own new form of upscaling. And this is really the main reason why I'm very hesitant when it comes to the idea of whether or not a 5 Pro is going to be worth it based on what we're seeing right now. Because it's one thing to look at specs on paper and be like, yes, if we're looking at how games are running on current hardware and this is the performance boost we're going to be seeing, and that's the only significant difference between these two things, then we know that these games are going to perform this well. But if we're talking about something like upscaling technology, well, there's a lot more unknowns because you really don't actually know how that's going to perform until you see it in person. Obviously, upscaling in general exists. You can see plenty of examples of it in other games that have released that don't support native 4K on systems, but instead rely on some kind of upscaling technique to achieve that. PlayStation in particular has been doing this since the PS4 Pro. Horizon Zero Dawn, for instance, was a title that did this. And the thing about upscaling techniques like this is that it's very easy to say, yes, because of how it's reconstructing a higher resolution image, you're going to get better performance while hitting those higher frame rates. But it isn't always that way in execution, right? You really need to see how the resulting upscaled image is looking to really deem whether or not it's something that seems close to native or not. And so that's the big headache with the selling point of the Pro being upscaling tech. It's something that we can, talk about in concept, but until we actually see how their own particular form of it works out and how games are able to leverage it, there's just not really a great way to give an answer right now. And there's a couple other very important things that go along with this, like the price of the system and how widely a feature like this is going to be supported. For price, one of the arguments for making a system that is only marginally more powerful and relying on upscaling techniques is that it's able to control the cost of the device. But depending on what exactly the system is bringing to the table, I'm not sure how much more Sony really wants to charge people. There is also the concept that, perhaps the current gen models could be getting a price drop at the same time the Pro comes out, which I don't think is super likely. I mean, if anything, the PS5 has increased in price over time. That's happened internationally and even in the US, going from the old digital to the new slim digital, saw a $50 bump. I don't see that immediately dropping this soon to make room for a Pro, but by that same token, looking at what we've seen for the Pro doesn't sound like it's going to end up being wildly more expensive. And then the other important question is, again, how well something like this is supported, because one of the headaches that comes with something like a mid-gen cycle boost for a console is that unlike a PC where, you have adjustable settings for your individual games and you could just immediately take advantage of the difference in power, with Pro consoles, the history has really been, well, what devs actually choose to make use of this situation, take advantage of it, and add Pro level profiles for their games. Because there have been plenty of examples of titles that even back on the PS4 Pro, never got an enhanced Pro version. Not only from third-party companies, but even from first-party exclusive titles. I think, the really iconic example of this is something like Bloodborne, a game that never got an official PS4 Pro patch. There have been people who have done mods for things like running a 60-frame version of the game on PS4 Pros, but that is not an official thing that ever actually released. And to this day, people are still waiting to see if Bloodborne's going to make its way to current-gen systems, or at least PCs, to open up a better-performing version of the game. Because as it stands, we're all still stuck with the basic PS4 version that released when the game first came out in 2015. Oh my god, that was 9 years ago. The point is that when it comes to something like a more traditional gaming console that has a 0.5 generation boost up, a power boost in all games is not a guarantee. There's going to be some things where they do. For instance, games that maybe target 30 but, struggle to hit it consistently. Yeah, the extra power is going to make sure that they actually do hit that cap more consistently and run more smoothly. But if you want to see things where, games are opening the frame rate to whole higher caps, going from 30 to 60, supporting different resolutions, adding different performance profiles specific to that hardware, you need to have that dev support, which, first party wise, we're more than likely going to see come from a lot of things that are owned directly by Sony. But when it comes to things like third-party developers, and even third-party developers that are releasing stuff that's being published under Sony, like the Bloodborne example, it's not a 100% guarantee. And that's why I think right now, if you have not bought a PS5 yet, you haven't invested in the platform at all, and you're thinking about getting one, maybe just hold off for now until we learn more about what Sony's actual official plans are for the Pro. Not because I think the Pro is going to be, absolutely the best way of playing these games, but simply because we don't actually really know. We have an idea based on these leaks, but because of how it's relying on certain things like upscaling, we just don't know how that final experience is really going to pair up, and more importantly, how many games are going to be supporting it right out the gate, along with what price point it's going to cost to get in the first place compared to a regular PS5. Now, obviously, if you don't care about performance boosts, if there's just certain games you want to grab right away, sure, go ahead, no problem. You want to play Rise of the Ronin or Stellar Blade right away? Absolutely, go for it. But if any part of you is the type of person to care about getting the, biggest, best version of a system, I'm not necessarily saying the Pro is for sure going to be it and any kind of noticeable leap and bound better, but there's enough of a question mark right now where you probably want to wait before you spend $500 and then have to spend that all over again and then some. So those are just some thoughts on whether or not you should be waiting for the PS5 Pro or if it's safe to just go ahead and grab a regular system right now. If watching this you happen to be convinced that you should just go ahead and buy a current gen system right now, no worry, I do have it linked down below in the description. You'll also see down there a link to today's sponsor, BetterHelp. Thank you to them once again for sponsoring today's video. As always, if you enjoyed this video and found it useful, hit the thumbs up button to let me know, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you guys later.